Well, as many of you know, I'm Linda Katz-Willner, and I'm the director and founder of Successfully Speaking. And Successfully Speaking helps individuals from diverse backgrounds achieve excellence in communication, and it also helps them maximize their professional success. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how Successfully Speaking came to be. And I probably did this the first time we met, but that's been quite some time ago. As my training is as a speech and language pathologist. So I am licensed by the state of Maryland and certified by the American Speech and Hearing Association. My original work was clinical. So I worked in hospitals. I worked with children and adults who had speech, language, voice, swallowing problems. And I worked in the hospital and I worked in private practice. After that, and again, I really got to appreciate what goes on in healthcare working in a hospital and seeing where communication broke down between the patient, the doctor, my patients, their physicians, all the different dyads that were possible. So it really made me understand what was happening in healthcare, and healthcare has changed a lot since I first started. I then evolved to working with professional voice and seeing professional singers, professional speakers who were looking to improve their vocal presence. When that started happening and I was in Philadelphia, some people would just say to me, I just don't like the way I sound. And they did not have a voice disorder, which is what I was trained to work with, but they had issues with the way they were using their voice, especially professional speakers. Some people didn't like the nasal quality to their voice, and I started learning, well, that was a Philadelphia accent. And I'm a transported New Yorker, and I had a New York accent, a stronger New York accent than I have now, and I diligently worked to make some changes because I started to see that people stereotyped me the minute they heard me talk. And it gave me an appreciation for what happens with your communication if you're speaking in a certain way. People make judgments about you right away. They may not be true, but I felt I wanted to tone down that New York accent because I didn't always love the fact that that was the first thing that would come out of somebody's mouth, like, oh, you're from Long Island. Oh, you wear Shalimar, which was back years ago. All these stereotypes of what a New Yorker was. So it really gave me an understanding. And what started happening is I started working with more and more people who had accents, regional dialects, but especially foreign accents. And I can appreciate the challenge they had because it wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It was that people really weren't understanding them, yet they had excellent knowledge and great skill sets, but just not necessarily the skill sets for communication. So what I bring to Successfully Speaking is a passion to just help people, whether they have a disorder or whether they just don't like the way they sound, to improve their communication so they can be successful in work but also in their social life. So let me first give you some ideas of the typical phone calls and the clients that come across my desk each day. There may be a project manager who is concerned that when he speaks, his voice doesn't have the power and confidence that he wants to have when he's leading a group. You may hear of, as you hear this, it may be you, it may be some people that you work with. A team leader may feel that his speech does not reflect his educational level, and I get this call all the time, that they feel they may not have good grammar, good pronunciation, maybe because of the educational system that they started with, and here they have a master's degree, they're working, and they feel they don't sound educated. So what can they do to polish that? A supervisor may be feeling awkward with small talk or networking events. And this is going to be a bigger challenge. A lot of us may have some of those issues. Just in networking events, we're more nervous or we feel like we have to be on. What about the person who speaks English as a second language, who doesn't even have those language skills to have small talk? They're excellent as an IT professional. They know the language of that. They're excellent as a doctor. They know that lingo, but they put them in a group where they just have to socialize. How do you make small talk? That's always a challenge. Somebody is promoted and all of a sudden they have to do more public speaking. What do they do about that? They've never had to do that at their lower position. I once received a call from somebody and they said that their manager at their hotel, their general manager, was from Nigeria, and he was charming and wonderful, but when he spoke to the guests, they didn't understand him. And unfortunately, he worked on Nursery Road. The hotel was on Nursery Road, and as a Nigerian, it was Nasri. And when he'd say Nursery Road, nobody knew what he was even talking about. So that becomes an occupational problem, that he's speaking and people aren't understanding him. I can't say enough about this issue. A nursing supervisor may hear from her staff and the patients that they don't understand the nurse. And not only that, the nurse has an attitude. I've heard this so much in hospitals today. We have so many recruited nurses, especially from Nigeria, where I've worked with a lot of nurses from Nigeria, and they're charming, yet the perception is they're abrupt and they cop an attitude. And I spoke to some hospitals about this, and what it really is they're using the intonation style of their first language. And they raise their voice when they're trying to emphasize things rather than raise their pitch. And so they sound angry. So that's something not only can they change, but the people who work around them need to understand that about communication skills, that it's not an attitude, it's a pattern of speaking. And then there's the non-native general managed consultant who has to do a lot of work by telephone, and his supervisor is saying, they don't understand you in these meetings. And then many of you may have experienced this with a scheduling clerk or receptionist. You call an office, the person may not have good communication skills, they may be abrupt, they don't know how to use their voice to sound polite, or you may even have telemarketers who are reading from scripts. All of these areas break down. So what I do with Successfully Speaking goes across the spectrum to all different types of positions, all different types of communication. Okay, I can't help but talk about communication and not talk about the products that I've developed. I have a colleague in Boston who does the same thing that I do, and we formed a company, ESL Rules, where we've developed training materials for non-native English speakers. So these are some of the products over the years, since 2002, that we've written and created. They're training materials for people who speak English as a second language. We have all these products for medical, because I've done a lot of work with doctors and nurses. I don't know if you realize it, you may have seen it going to see into an emergency room or whatever, but 25% of the doctors in the United States are foreign trained. And 21% of the foreign trained doctors are from India. And even though their English may be good, we don't always understand their pronunciation. And so that's a big problem in healthcare. So we do have some products for healthcare, for medical interpreters, doctors, nurses, and then we have other products for other individuals who have excellent command of English, but they have issues with their accent. Things that I do address in training would be public speaking concerns and anxiety. And I feel what I can bring to it as a clinical speech pathologist, I've worked with people with anxiety, public speaking, people who stutter. So there are things you can do to help with those issues. Work with nonverbal communication, like we just talked about, the visual aspects. Cultural aspects of communication. Our workplace is so diverse today, so we need to understand the different cultures and some rules for whether you should touch somebody when you're talking to them, or if somebody's getting real close to you and you're backing up, you need to understand that there are different ways that people will communicate, and just learn the different styles. I also work with the vocal and the verbal communication as well. And then communication repair strategies. What happens when communication breaks down? That's not just with non-native people. What do? You need a toolkit on strategies that, okay, if something breaks down, you need to do something. Or to tell a non-native person, give people permission to ask you a question. Like, tell me if you don't understand me, but if you don't say that, they're not going to tell you. So you need to just educate people on what they can use, or how to repeat, what should you do when you don't understand it? Repeat it 3 times the same way? Probably not. Everybody's going to get a little frustrated. The formats of my training are, I do individual coaching or training. I work with small groups, large groups, workshops. I can do intensive training. I've gone to some hospitals to do focus groups because they have issues with communication, and I got to speak with some of the nurses to get some of their perceptions of the other nurses. I've done brown bag lunches, and then of course I can customize seminars. I work at the workplace. I go on site to work with individuals. I have an office in Owings Mills. And I do a lot of distance training. For the past 5 years or so, I've been working with priests, international priests from West Virginia, where when they come into West Virginia, they're dealing with a rural community, and they have heavy accents, and they're giving homilies, and people don't understand them. And you'll never tell a priest, I don't understand. So these priests keep saying, oh no, they're telling me great homily. But they're not going to say that to an authority figure. So I've been working with web-based training with all these priests that come into West Virginia. The bishop said, go through the evaluation first to see how you communicate, and I work with them. So I can do training around the country. I've worked with some classes in Peru, some people in Korea. It's a challenge to do this, but I do the web-based training, or I could do a combination of that. So when you're speaking to people, who are my potential clients? Large population of international employees. You'll see that in the IT industry. You'll see that in healthcare. You're going to see that with the clergy. Any place where there are non-native speakers, but there are pockets where you'll see a lot. Scientists, engineers, a lot of Asians will be in that and those occupations. Anybody who needs help with public speaking. And again, a lot of us do public speaking type skills. There are different things we bring to it. Executive coaching. I've worked with some people where they've had 6 months of executive coaching and then it's coming to an end and their issue is, but I don't have that vocal presence when I get into the room. Well, then it's time to bring somebody in who has the training like I have. And then individuals who just want to polish their skills. I get calls all the time about that. I just don't sound educated enough. I'm moving up in the organization and my grammar's not good. So they can work on those areas. So in summary, I look at the visual, I look at the vocal, I look at the verbal, and I look to make them all consistent so not one area sabotages the others. Because when you have that disconnect, it does affect your image. So when you work on the three together, hopefully you come across with a very powerful and positive impression. And that's what I like to do with Successfully Speaking.